The other day, somebody asked me how I project such confidence and if there's anything that the Trump regime is trying to do that really scares me. I mean, I would say there's a whole lot that they're trying to do that really scares me. That's why I'm so determined not to let the fear paralyze me and enable them to be successful. But if I'm going to be honest, the thing that really scares me the most is not really Donald Trump. It's actually the Supreme Court. It's a big part of the reason why I was willing to vote for Hillary Clinton, even though there was tons of ways that I didn't like her. Every time I get people on the left saying both parties are essentially the same, there's no difference, I like to ask them what the Supreme Court would look like if Hillary Clinton had won. And I don't like Hillary Clinton. She did want comprehensive campaign finance reform, though, and she would have created a very different looking Supreme Court. And we would not be in this position now had she been elected then. But now we have the uber conservative majority of 6 on the Supreme Court who believe in their what was previously very fringe unitary executive theory. They have seemed determined to make a king out of Donald Trump in order to further their, far-right Christian ideology, wanting to make a theocracy in this country, using a man that they know does not adhere to any of their beliefs in order to further their vision for this country. So they're what I'm really worried about. And right now, when I look at all of the things that are happening, I am deeply concerned about this upcoming case. I think it's not going to be heard until October. The Supreme Court, though, has agreed to reevaluate sections of the Voting Rights Act. I'm going to be quoting a little bit here and there from an article from Slate.com from a week ago. It's entitled, "The Supreme Court is Determined to Turn Voting into a Limited Privilege." It's by Allegra Lawrence Hardy and Joyce White Vance. Both of these women are attorneys that I respect very, very much. I really encourage you to go read the full piece. In the United States, our ability to vote is supposed to be protected by law. But on the Voting Rights Act's 60th anniversary, that law is being eviscerated to stop voters and their lawyers from defending that freedom in court. Our courts are a modern-day public square where anyone is supposedly able to confront injustice, hold the powerful accountable, and defend their rights. For generations, courts have helped ensure equal access to the ballot, striking down racial gerrymanders and discriminatory voting laws. But now that public square is being fenced off, and in some places it feels like a permanent wall is going up. Now, I'm not an attorney, I'm entirely a layperson, but even I can understand the significant harm to our liberties that have been caused by John Roberts and his control of the court. The article goes on to talk about how the first significant blow to voting rights came in 2013 with Shelby County v. Holder. Back then, John Roberts claimed that the blight of racial discrimination in voting had been largely cured. Look what's happening in Texas right now. In May of this year, 2025, the court ruled that Alabama's redistricting intentionally discriminated against Black voters. But in 2013, John Roberts was like, no, this isn't a problem anymore. We can just erode these protections. This was in the past. So something that white supremacists and conservatives have been pushing for quite a while is this targeting of a section of the Voting Rights Act, which allows folks to challenge racially motivated practices that suppress the vote. So if SCOTUS ends up agreeing with the Eighth Circuit, then only the DOJ would be able to bring those cases. And we know that Trump's DOJ has no intention of protecting folks from racial discrimination at the ballot box. But as the authors say here, the court has also seized upon a second path to dismantle the Voting Rights Act even more resoundingly. In a case slated for the October 2025 term, the court issued an after-hours order just this past week, now 2 weeks ago, on the eve of the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, signaling their plans to deliberate the constitutionality of Section 2 and its continued viability altogether. Again, if only the Department of Justice is allowed to defend these rights and you have Donald Trump and Pam Bondi in charge of it, it's a bad scene, y'all. Already, Trump and Bondi have removed career attorneys whose entire job was to make sure that the Voting Rights Act was followed. And I know it's been on the back burner for quite a while, y'all, but the SAVE Act has already passed the House and is sitting in the Senate. It's not just Black folks in the United States whose voting rights are at risk because of this. I mean, that in and of itself would be enough. That would be enough for all of us to be up in arms over this. But it's also women. The SAVE Act specifically targets women. If we're not allowed to seek justice in the courts, and only the Department of Justice can do that, and they're not interested, do you see how that effectively creates a situation in which potentially only white men will be voting? And as the authors here mention, rightly so, this attack is coming from multiple angles. Yes, the Supreme Court has their own agenda. Yep, Pam Bondi's Department of Justice, they have the same agenda. But they're coming at it from a different angle, firing attorneys, declining to bring cases that they could bring in defense of Americans' rights. But it's more than that. One of the ways that it's been harder for individuals and civil rights groups to challenge discriminatory voting laws is the way that big law in this country has bent the knee to Donald Trump. Skadden, Paul Weiss, as big law firms have decided they will serve the fascist regime of Donald Trump, as they have sold their souls, offered billions of dollars of pro bono hours pursuing Trump's interests in the court. It is now harder and harder for individuals and civil rights groups to find attorneys. The attorneys who would have previously taken their cases will now be on the other side of the courtroom. Please understand that a lot of very wealthy attorneys in this country have sold out democracy, have sold out your voting rights in order to become a pillar of support under the Trump regime so that they can continue to maximize their profit. They did it for money. They sold all of us out for money. Delu Blue folks get real mad at me when I push back against their cockamamie theories that Elon Musk and Starlink somehow zapped the votes. And yet they ignore the very real and far less theatrical ways that Republicans have been disenfranchising voters and cheating in elections for decades. And it's about to get worse. Y'all, it's gerrymandering and it's voter suppression. Those are the two tools in the toolbox of the Republicans, and they've been very effective at employing them. And we are watching the uber conservative majority on the Supreme Court continue to erode our voting rights and empower Republicans to keep cheating. They don't want to have a representative democracy. They want to gerrymander the shit. In fact, they have already gerrymandered the shit out of much of the South. I mean, it's not just the South. Ohio is very gerrymandered. But beyond gerrymandering, Republicans want to make it as hard as possible for you to be able to vote, because they know when there's massive voter turnout, they lose over and over and over again. I mean, we need only look at the 2024 election. Low voter turnout means that Republicans are more likely to win. So as the authors mention here, they want to create as many hurdles as possible to make it as hard as possible for you to register to vote, to get to vote, and to have your vote be counted. Republican-controlled states are anxious to maintain their grasp on power and continue to suppress voters who would turn those states blue. And so they're really chomping at the bit for more of the Voting Rights Act to be gutted. After Shelby County v. Holder was decided in 2013, within 24 hours, Republican-controlled states started instituting more strict voter laws, like Texas reinstated their voter ID law that had previously been blocked because it specifically targeted Black and Latino voters. And then within a couple of months, North Carolina passed a law that cut early voting down by a week, ended same-day voter registration, and imposed strict ID rules. Yeah, the court ruled later that North Carolina had been specifically targeting Black voters with, quote, almost surgical precision. Another strategy Republicans use is they want to declare you an inactive voter and dump you off the voting rolls. And before you realize what's happened, it's past the date to register and now you can't vote in the next election. I'm going to close out by reading the final words from Allegra Lawrence Hardy and Joyce White Vance. But first, let me just remind everybody, there's not some sci-fi plot to have Starlink zap your votes, y'all. It is the very mundane, very racist, very historically successful tactics of the Republicans to disenfranchise voters, to suppress the vote, and to gerrymander that have gotten us in the situation we're in now, and they want to amplify those so that it's even harder for us to have democracy in the future. Ultimately, we're in an era where the burden of protecting democracy is falling on individuals. That is not how it should be. Voting is a right, not a privilege or a test of endurance. Yet on the 60th anniversary of the Voting Rights Act, a law meant to stop Jim Crow at the courthouse door, we're inching back toward an era where justice is out of reach for those who need it most.